I swear, I will not desert the Republic. Whoever does not swear, know that this sword is drawn against him. To understand this oath, to understand the rage of a 20-year-old boy, you first have to understand the silence of Cannae. 70,000 Roman souls gone before the sun had even set. The slaughter was so absolute that the rivers ran red, and the silence was louder than the screams of the dying. Hannibal Barca had not just defeated Rome's army, he had decapitated it. He collected the gold rings from the fingers of the fallen senators, bushels of them, and poured them onto the floor of the Carthaginian Senate, a message written in gold and blood. Rome is finished. Terror gripped the eternal city. The cry echoed in every street. Hannibal at Portas. Hannibal is at the gates. But the real danger wasn't outside the walls. It was inside. In the town of Canusium, the survivors of the massacre had gathered. The young nobles, the future of Rome, were broken. They whispered of abandonment. Italy is lost, they said. Let us flee to Greece. Let us leave this cursed land to the beast. They were ready to desert their home. Until the door crashed open. He was only 20 years old. Publius Cornelius Scipio. He had just walked through the hell of Cannae. He had seen the pile of bodies. But unlike the others, he did not see defeat. He saw a debt that needed to be paid. He drew his sword, the sound of steel cutting through the whimpering fear in the room. He didn't offer them comfort. He offered them a choice. He pointed his blade at the throat of the ringleader and swore an oath that would shake the foundations of history. I swear, he roared, that I will not desert the Republic, nor will I allow any other citizen of Rome to do so. He looked into their terrified eyes. Swear it, or this sword, which has just tasted Carthaginian blood, will drink yours right now. One by one, they swore. They didn't know it yet, but in that dark room, amidst the ashes of defeat, the conqueror of Africa was born. Rome had found its wolf. 5 years later, the fear in Rome had not faded. It had turned into despair. The legions in Spain had been crushed. Scipio's own father and uncle were dead, betrayed and slaughtered. When the Senate asked, who will lead the new army to Spain? Silence filled the hall. The great generals looked at their feet. They knew Spain was a graveyard. But then the young wolf stepped forward again. Now 25 years old, too young to command by law. But he was the only one with fire in his eyes. The people cheered, but the old senators sneered. They sent him to Spain to die. They were wrong. Scipio did not fight like a Roman. He fought like Hannibal. He targeted New Carthage, the enemy's capital. It was an impregnable fortress, surrounded by massive walls and a deep lagoon. But Scipio knew a secret. He didn't just study the maps, he studied the fishermen. They told him that every evening the wind changed and the lagoon dropped. Scipio stood before his superstitious soldiers and told them that Neptune himself had visited him in a dream. He promised them a miracle, and it happened. When the wind blew, the water receded, revealing a muddy path to the walls. The soldiers didn't see a tactical maneuver, they saw a god opening the gates for Scipio. Faith is a stronger weapon than steel. In a single day, he took the city, the gold, and the enemy's soul. Yet, Rome is a city of jealousy. When Scipio returned a hero, he demanded to take the war to Africa, to Hannibal's doorstep. The Senate refused. They were afraid. They gave him permission to go, but they gave him no army. If you want to die in Africa, they said, go alone. So Scipio went to Sicily, to the ghost legions. You have to understand who these men were. These were the survivors of Cannae, men who had been banished, stripped of their honor, and forbidden from sleeping under a roof. They had been living in tents in the mud for 12 years, waiting to die in shame. Rome had forgotten them, but Scipio hadn't. He walked into their camp, looked at their rusted armor and hollow eyes, and said, Rome calls you cowards. I call you the only men who know how to kill Hannibal. Come with me and wash your honor in Carthaginian blood. and like that the army of the dead rose again. But Scipio knew that ghost soldiers were not enough. To defeat Hannibal, he needed horses. He turned to the Numidian prince, Massinissa. Massinissa was fighting a brutal civil war for his throne. Scipio used this chaos. He offered Massinissa a crown in exchange for his cavalry. Massinissa took the deal, but he arrived with a heavy heart. In the chaos of that civil war, he had lost his wife, a tragedy that had turned his heart to stone. He joined Scipio not just for land, but because he had nothing left but rage. And here lies the irony. Look at Scipio's army now. Veteran infantry in the center, and lightning-fast Numidian cavalry on the wings. Scipio hadn't just built a Roman army. He had recreated the very army Hannibal used to terrorize Italy. He had built the beast's own reflection, to kill the beast. The plains of Zama, 202 BC, two titans face to face. Before the swords were drawn, they met in the middle of the field, alone. Hannibal, the old lion, gray and weary. Scipio, the young wolf, golden and sharp. Hannibal warned him, "Peace is better than victory. Fortune is a fickle goddess. Today, you are me. Tomorrow, you could be the defeated." Scipio simply nodded. "I did not come to negotiate peace, Hannibal. I came to finish it." The battle began with a tremor in the earth. 80 war elephants. Hannibal's living tanks charged, screaming, designed to crush the Roman lines into dust. But Scipio did not flinch. He gave a silent signal. Suddenly, thousands of trumpets and horns blew at the exact same moment. The sound was piercing, shattering the air. The beasts, terrified by the deafening noise and confused by the open lanes Scipio had created, panicked. They didn't charge forward, they turned back. They crushed Hannibal's own cavalry. Scipio had turned Hannibal's greatest weapon into a joke. But the fight was not over. Hannibal sent in his veterans, the old guard. The clash was brutal, shield against shield. The Romans were being pushed back. The ghost of Cannae hovered over the battlefield. Scipio was on the brink of ruin. And then he heard it, the thunder of hooves from the horizon, Massinissa. The Numidian cavalry returned, slamming into the rear of Hannibal's army with the force of a hurricane. The circle was closed. The master of the encirclement was finally encircled. The student had learned his lesson well, and the master had nowhere left to run. Yet the Lion of Carthage did not die. Escaping the slaughter, Hannibal rode back to his city to do the one thing harder than fighting. He told his people to surrender. The war was over. The nightmare had ended. For Scipio, the deed was done. He had saved the Republic from extinction. Now it was time to return home. Not just as a general, but as a legend. The crowds in Rome screamed his name, Africanus, the conqueror, the savior. But glory in Rome is a poison. While the people loved him, the Senate feared him. Men like Cato the Elder looked at Scipio and didn't see a hero. They saw a threat. They saw a king. And Rome hates kings. The betrayal was slow and cold. They dragged him to court. They accused him of bribery, of stealing gold. Him, the man who had given them the world. Scipio stood in the Senate, holding the account books they demanded. He looked at the small, envious men around him. The tension was suffocating. He didn't defend himself. He tore the books into pieces and threw them on the floor. He turned to the crowd and shouted, "Romans, on this very day, I defeated Hannibal and conquered Carthage. Therefore, I am going to the temple of Jupiter to thank the gods for saving this republic. Those who love Rome, follow me." The entire crowd, judges, accusers, and citizens, abandoned the court and followed him to the temple. He left his enemies alone in an empty room. It was his last victory. Not with a sword, but with pure charisma. But the wound was deep. He walked out of Rome, and he never returned. He went into voluntary exile at Liternum, a quiet villa by the sea. In a cruel twist of irony, across the sea, Hannibal was also dying in exile. two giants, the greatest of their age, both cast aside by the nations they had served. When death finally came for the wolf of Rome, he was bitter and alone. He had one last order, not for a statue, not for a parade, but for a simple inscription on his tombstone. A final curse to the city he had loved too much: Ingrata patria, ne ossa quidem mea habebis. Ungrateful fatherland, you shall not even have my bones. Reached the end of another journey, through the dusty pages of history. But the whispers of the past never cease. Subscribe to stay with us on this mysterious voyage.